Never has a piece of cloth proven to receive such attention in the mainstream public. Although the hijab has been deemed to be an oppressive aspect in a female's life, many become enlightened by its force of liberation at some point in their lives. While the hijab has been recognized as a form of exploitation, Islam emphasizes the special value it gives to a Muslim. Beauty that is hidden behind a cloth has elevated so many females in so many ways. In this documentary, we speak to Sarah Kermali as she tells us what triggered her decision in wearing the scarf. Sabina, an ex-French citizen, delves into her experiences living in France and what made her move to the UK with a new life and new decisions.
The Muslim women in the beginning of Islam and non-Muslims, they used to cover their hair, but they would show their bosoms, this area. It was open. So Quran came and said, وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ, let them cast down with their khimar, with their covers, ala jiyubihin. This area in Arabic is called the jayb, the bosom here. So they have to cover this area. This is one verse. The second one is chapter 33, Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 59. Verse 59, يا أيها النبي قل لأزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن ذلك أدنى أن يعرفن فلا يؤذين وكان الله غفورا رحيما. Here, in that one, in Surah An-Nur, God used the term khimar. In this one, God uses the term jilbab. عليهن من جلابيبهن, plural of jilbab. And jilbab also is like the overcoat, that the cover that goes covers the entire body. This is jilbab. It's similar to what people today wear in certain cultures, and it is called abaya, for instance. So this is the jilbab that covers the whole body, not just this area, you know, the front or the back area, the entire body. This is jilbab. And God says, say to your wife, to your daughters, and the daughters of the believers, meaning your community, they have to observe the jilbab. يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِيبِهِنَّ. There are other references in the Quran in regards to the hijab. The third one, again in chapter 33, Surah Al-Ahzab, وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. This is an order, a command to the wives of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that do not display yourself. Tabarruj is when someone displays himself or herself. So tabarruj is the opposite of hijab. Hijab when you cover, and tabarruj when you uncover or display. So God is telling them, وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. Do not display yourself or uncover yourself in the same fashion that the people of the time of ignorance used to do. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Let them cast down upon their eyes. They should not, when they see something in the street which is inappropriate to look at, they have to control themselves. And also at the same time, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنْ. This is not just for the men, also for women. When they see something attractive and they're going to be influenced by it in any way, they have to control their vision. Purpose of hijab is to protect women first and to protect the society second. To protect women and give them value, because Islam hates to see that women are appreciated only for their physical appearance. or physical structure or their flesh, their bodies. This is, Islam says, this is not respect, this is degradation. When you evaluate a lady, a female, based on just her physical appearance, you are not respecting her. You are reducing her to flesh and blood. You are saying that, listen, I don't care about your intelligence. I don't care about your knowledge. I don't care about your contribution. I don't care whether you are educated or non-educated. I don't care whether you are a good person, a good contributor to your society and your family or not. All what I care about is how you look, your hairstyle, your eyes, your physical structure. So this is not good. You are not giving her credit for the real values that she carries with her. She's a human being. Before being blood and flesh, she is human being. She has a human soul. She has a huge potential for contributing to her society, helping her society, being a positive element in her society. But once we focus only on the physical side of her, we are eliminating all other, aspects and dimensions of her side. And this is an abuse to women. God does not want women to be abused. God says, give them what they deserve according to their contribution, according to their influence. If she's a good mother, if she's a good daughter, if she's a loyal wife, if she's a good teacher, if she's a good contributor in her society, then you have to grade her for that, not for how she looks. Because if we only evaluate women, or even men, according to how they look, we are going to do a lot of injustice. Meaning that only those who are, they look attractive and beautiful and handsome, we're going to respect them and take care of them. And those who are not, even though they are very influential, very sincere, very dedicated, we don't care about them. So this is number one, to protect women, to give them more value, not to treat them as material entity or physical entity, to treat them as moral and spiritual entity. The second reason for hijab is to protect the society. We are human beings, and we are made of emotions and desires. And sometimes these desires and emotions, unfortunately, they overcome reason and aql. And they knock the reason down. They knock it down. And once they knock it down, we are reduced to mere animals. Because animals are controlled by desires, not by reason. While men, human being, men and women, are controlled by reason, by their aql, by their intelligence. And unfortunately, we live in a society which is truly obsessed by physical appearance. Not by the content, not by the contribution or the moral values, by how we look. We spend a lot of time on, not just time, but wealth and money on cosmetic surgeries and, just to make ourselves, be presentable and acceptable to the people, to the society. And this is not good. This will take us away from our main goal. Main goal is not bodybuilding, is spirit building. To build our characters, to build our spirits, to dedicate our life to serve the humanity, to serve the cause of God, not to be busy fixing our physical appearance. فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ فَيَطْمَعُ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَضٍ. When you speak, even when you speak, your voice should not be very soft and very lenient, because those who have sickness in their hearts, their faith is not very strong, is not very solid, are going to get you wrong, are going to misunderstand you. So don't do that. Because she is the source of this, attraction, the main source of attraction, therefore there is more emphasis on her to observe the hijab. But that does not mean that men have no role and they can wear whatever, or they can not wear actually whatever they want. It's not like that. Also in the Quran and the Hadith, there's a lot of commands for men to observe the proper code of dress, whether they are in a holy place, in a mosque, or outside, in the marketplace, in public. Those that she's exempted from wearing the hijab with them, basically very obvious: her husband, her father, her siblings, her brothers, and her children, and her nephews, and the stepson, when she's married to a man, of course, and that man has children, boys, from another wife, then once she's married to him, then his children also become her mahram, so she doesn't have to wear hijab from them. Those are the exception. Others are non-mahram, considered non-mahram, and she has to observe the hijab with them, including, I forgot to mention also, her uncles also, paternal and maternal. But her cousins, her first cousins, second cousins, from her mother's side, maternal or paternal from her father's side, although they are very close to her, maybe they were raised together, maybe they lived in the same neighborhood, in the same house, but when they reach the age of religious maturity, bulugh, she has to observe the hijab when she is with them. The physical hijab as well as the spiritual and the moral hijab. And I always say moral hijab is more important than the physical one. Because look at the Quran. The Quran begins with the moral hijab, then the physical. وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنَّ وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. Then says وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ. The first 3 or 4 items are moral hijab, meaning that they have to cast down their eyes, they should not look. Then they have to protect themselves, they have to behave in a nice fashion, in an honorable fashion, and after that, they have to put on the physical hijab. So even when she is with her cousin, doesn't mean that they are cousins from the same family. They can hug each other and kiss each other and have physical contact with each other. They should stay away from that.
Like many, Sarah was born Muslim, but only recently decided to wear the hijab. After a spiritual experience at the shrine of Lady Zainab, Sarah felt that the hijab itself was the message of Zainab, and felt that it was time to raise the flag of Islam.
I went to Karbala 3 years ago. It was December 2010, and that was my first ziyarat. And basically before that, I had no intention of wearing hijab. I've never worn it before, like no social gatherings or anything like that. And I didn't even know how to wear it, to be honest. And then when I went to Karbala, I wasn't even prepared actually to go there, but when I went there, one time when we were all sitting around in our group, there was basically one of the organizers, he was giving a speech about the tragedy. And then one of the things he said that really stood out to me was Imam Hussein alayhi salam sacrificed his entire family and himself and shed the blood of so many people just basically for Islam. So, I mean, how can we not sacrifice our looks? And he was referring to men keeping the beard and ladies wearing hijab. And at that point, I wanted to kind of unhear it because it made me feel so like ashamed, but then it stuck with me and I'm really glad it did. And then I went to Sham right after that. So that was, I think, January. So a couple weeks later, we went to Sham. And then One time I went to the shrine of Bibi Zainab alayhi salam, and I was standing in front of her. I was crying, and I knew all the sacrifices she had been through. And then what came to me at that point was when Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam was asked what was the most difficult part, he said, Asham, Asham, Asham. So, I mean, I was there crying for the sacrifice of Bibi Zainab alayhi salam and all of the women in the Prophet's family and Imam Hussein alayhi salam's family who were basically paraded around in the streets of Sham without their veil. And these were basically the pearls of the Prophet and their entire family. And I was crying because I knew this, and that was a tragedy. And then I was thinking to myself, like, I'm standing in front of her today with hijab and abaya because I'm supposed to, because I'm a zawar. And then tomorrow am I going to go back to Canada and then just take it off and like insult everything that she stood for. So then I was only there for about 4 days. So I was thinking about it while I was there and visited her shrine a couple of times. And I just kept thinking about it. And then in the whole plane ride back, I was thinking about it. And then when I landed, I just decided that I'm never taking this off. I got so much support from my family and my friends. I wasn't even sure about how my non-Muslim friends would react or like classmates or anything like that, but everyone was so supportive, and I spoke to my non-Muslim friends about it. This was during winter break, so I told them when I'm coming back, I'm going to be wearing hijab because this is a decision I've made while I was in Karbala. And they were really excited for me, actually. And obviously my family was really, really proud of me, and they're really happy with my decision. So after I started wearing my hijab, my grandpa, he lived with me when I was living in Canada. And in the mornings, like if I wasn't wearing hijab, as soon as I woke up, he'd be like, "Why are you not wearing hijab?" I'm like, "Papa, I'm in my house. I don't need to, and I don't need to wear it in front of you." So yeah, they were really supportive, and all of my friends were as well. They were really happy for me, and they didn't treat me any differently or anything like that, so it was good. My mom doesn't wear hijab. My grandma does. Both of my grandmas do. And then, like, you know, my aunts and my cousins, some of them do, some of them don't. I can't think about any difficulties I faced after wearing the hijab. I mean, you know, in Hadith al-Qudsi, Allah says, if a believer takes one step towards me, I take 10 towards him. So I really found that this was true after I started wearing hijab. I mean, like, everything was so much easier for me. I was in university when I was wearing hijab, and before that I'd always feel pressured, and people would ask me, "Why aren't you coming here? Why aren't you doing this?" And after I wore hijab, like, I didn't even need to explain to anybody. They just knew. They had that respect at that point, and they were like, "I'm not going to even ask her." So everything became so much easier for me. Like, my entire deen became easier for me, and it just allowed me to focus. So I don't think I had really any difficulties at all. When I started wearing hijab and I came back to Toronto, I was like, you know what, everybody's going to look at me so differently, and people are going to stare at me and think I look, you know, that I'm crazy or something like that. And then when I was like going through the mall with like my cousin and my friend, I was walking around and I was like looking to see if anybody's staring at me, but nobody was doing that. They were just going along with their own business, and it was fine. And even like in university, when I went back to university, I thought basically like my classmates, all the people who were in my program, would look at me differently because I looked different, obviously, but everybody was so, like, they were so cool about it. And people that I knew, people who weren't Muslim, they were like, "Oh, like, I'm so happy that you're wearing the hijab," and they knew what it was, actually. So nobody even asked me any questions like, "Why did I wear it? What is it? Like, you know, what's the purpose?" And I kind of wanted them to, but nobody did. And then, I don't know, I found that a lot of people respected me, or, you know, they were really nice to me as opposed to giving me dirty looks or anything like that. So a lot more people would just like randomly smile at me or like hold open the door if they saw me a mile away. So, I mean, it was a little bit overbearing, but it's better than obviously, you know, being like not respected or looked down upon. Before I started wearing hijab, I thought about it, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put it off, and it's not for me, it's not right now, definitely not while I'm in university. And then I just kept putting it off in my head, like when I get married or when I have kids or a little bit later on in my life. I basically just knew, I knew what it was, I understood it. You know, I thought it was the right thing to do and that it was my duty and I should be doing it, but I basically just thought I wasn't ready. And then, you know, after I wore hijab, basically before, sorry, I wore hijab, I knew that it was also a responsibility. So one of my big reasons for, and this is what I was contemplating also in Sham, was that, am I ready to wear the hijab, as in, like people who wear hijab, women who wear hijab are the flag bearers of our religion. So am I ready to take on that huge responsibility? And like basically my actions will reflect my religion, not only myself. So that is what like that's basically what changed after I started wearing hijab. I took it as a responsibility, and I started just becoming a lot more involved in the community, and then trying to be involved in like school organizations, like Muslim things and all that, and just basically, yeah, trying to make an impact and thinking like, what impact am I going to make, and how am I going to help people, and how am I going to portray this religion now that I have this. For me, I just kind of jumped into it because I was inspired, but it's you're never going to be ready, honestly. You can never be perfect, and you can never be the perfect Muslim and be the perfect example of Bibi Zainab al-Islam or anything like that. But this is the first step, and everything will come, like, will definitely come along with that, and your life will really change if you perceive it the way that I did, basically, that it was a responsibility. But you know, it basically, it's the hijab is not just covering my hair, but it shunned me away from all of the fitna that was around me. And so, yeah.
Many Muslim girls find it hard to take the step towards the hijab due to the difficulties they face within their social surroundings. Some say they are pressured into fitting in with modern-day Western perceptions of women, an image which does not include the hijab, while others say they are simply not ready to take on the responsibility that comes with it.
Hijab is not just a piece of cloth or a scarf that a lady wears and she's done. That's it, she has no more responsibility. Actually, the bigger part of hijab is the behavioral part. Her behavior, her conduct, how she carries herself, how she approaches men and women in the society, how she speaks, how she behaves. This is the greatest part of it. Because if women today, let's say she's covered from head to toe, but her behavior is not good, is dis-Islamic, okay, is immoral, indecent, then first of all, people are not going to respect her. Second, she's sending the negative message to men around her that, hey, I'm here, I'm available. She's going to cheapen herself. So Islam says, number one, be careful of your behavior. Do not be soft when you speak. Respect yourself. You have to respect. See, who respects us in the first place? It is us. If I respect myself through watching for my behavior, watching out for my behavior and my conduct, people are going to respect me. But if I don't respect myself, I should not expect others to. Some parents, they don't care about the hijab until it is late, until their daughters, they reach the age of 15 and 16 and 17. And then all of a sudden, you cannot ask a person who spent her life 16 or 17 years without hijab to switch immediately. I'm not saying it's impossible. It does happen. It happens. But it's not easy. And therefore, we find many girls in the Muslim community, they are reluctant to observe the hijab because their parents, unfortunately, did not do enough in training them and teaching them and preparing them mentally and socially to practice it before that required age. They didn't care. Oh, let her alone. We don't want to abuse her. She's still young. She's this. But you have to prepare her. Maybe by the age of 6 or 7, slowly, at least when she comes to the mosque, to a religious ceremony. And then by the age of 7 and 8, when she starts wearing it, then when she's by the age of 9 and 10, she's ready for it. She has to go through this, trying to like it. She has to understand it. She has to know why she's doing this. She has to know why, for instance, she goes to a non-Islamic school, non-Islamic environment. Most of the kids there are not wearing hijab. Why she's wearing it? She has to know this reason. They have to explain it to her. So she would accept it, she would embrace it. I'm not with the idea of imposing hijab on the young girls against their will. I've seen examples of that the hijab was imposed on them, and when they left school, they went to college and university, they went to another city, another town, they threw the hijab away. And when they were asked, why are you doing like that? She says, because my parents forced me against. In Islam, there are many acts of faith that integrate each other. The prayers, the fasting, the almsgiving, the pilgrimage, the hijab is one of them, charity, being good to others, enjoining good, forbidding evil. These acts of worship, they integrate each other. So one of them by itself would not work. It has to be combined and integrated with other acts. However, that does not mean if someone does not fast, he should not only, he should also, he shouldn't pray too because he's not fasting. Or someone has not been to Hajj and says he's not going to Hajj, then he should not fast and he should not pay charity. God would accept these items independently. So if someone does pray and he doesn't fast, he will get reward for his prayers. But he will get punishment for not fasting. So for those who argue that I'm not praying, why should I bother and wear hijab? This will be a double crime. One for not praying and one for not wearing the hijab, not observing the hijab.
An increased Muslim population in the Western world has instigated a sudden rise in the hijab as a fashion statement. Young Muslim women are wearing their modest hijab in a way which is seen to be more fashion-friendly to the Western world. Over the past few years, YouTube channels made specifically by and for hijabis have increased, causing both controversy and positive support on the online world.
وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. They should not display their attraction except what is apparent. When it comes to this sentence, except what is apparent, إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا, the scholars, the jurists, theologians and jurists and scholars, they argue that this is a reference to two parts, which is already displayed or naturally displayed. However, there are other jurists who argue that the face has to be covered too, because the center of the beauty is where? How do we say this person is attractive, that person is not very attractive? What do we look at? Do we look at his shoes or his, Absolutely, we look at his or her face. So there are other scholars, some of them are contemporary, some of them are, classical and ancient, who believe that the face also has to be covered in this case. Many of the scholars today, contemporary scholars, they say the face is optional. It's not mandatory. It's optional. If it is inconvenient for her to cover her face, she can remove the cover from her face, but she has to cover the rest of the body.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you and welcome to the first in our 7th series of Doha debates.
In early 2008, France caused international uproar when they implemented a decision to ban the niqab. This was seen as an infringement of fundamental rights and a direct attack on the religion of Islam.
This is a debate about the French ban, and there are three very, very simple reasons why we should all be opposed to the French ban. Number one, it's unnecessary. Number two, it's self-defeating. Number three, it's morally wrong. It's unnecessary because less than 2,000 women in France wear the face veil. That's 0.1% of the 2 million adult Muslim women in France. That's 0.003% of the French population as a whole. This is not just taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut. This is like reaching for a bazooka to kill a fly. It is totally disproportionate and unnecessary. And it's self-defeating too, because all it does is it alienates an alienated Muslim minority in France. And it encourages young women in France to act defiantly and break the law and be different. And in fact, we already have evidence that the ban, which is supposed to liberate women, is already secluding and marginalizing and isolating those very same women. You look in Italy in April this year, where a Tunisian-born woman became the first person to be fined for wearing a veil in public. Her husband promptly announced that she would no longer leave the house so that he would avoid paying any more fines. So instead of being imprisoned in her veil, she's now imprisoned in her home. That's what the French call women's liberation. But above all else, it is morally wrong for the state to infringe on women's freedom to choose what they want to wear in public. Whether you like the veil or not, the French ban violates freedom of thought, of conscience, of expression, of religion, a whole string of fundamental human rights, which can now no longer be taken for granted in modern France. There's a reason why leading human rights groups, from Amnesty International to Human Rights Watch, are opposed to this ban. Because restricting a woman's freedom to wear the face veil in public is as much a violation of her human rights as it is to force her to wear that same face veil. And I wonder what's happened to the liberty, equality and fraternity in France. Instead, you have this illiberal, iniquitous, unjust ban, and the parliamentarians in Paris should hang their heads in shame.
As a result of this ban, and due to the increased pressure on Muslims in France, Sabina was intrigued to research more about the religion, and this journey led her to London.
I am originally from Madagascar. I have grown up in France, in Paris. I moved to London since more than a year now, and I started to wear hijab since I moved to London. I was not wearing hijab when I was in France. I work in marketing company specialized in IT. The reason I moved to London is because for work opportunity and also had some personal reasons. And I've also been very amazed by the multicultural environment in London. So I started wearing hijab since I moved to London. The reason why I started to wear hijab, it's a story 2 years ago during the holy month of Muharram. So I was still in France. I was working in a company where most of my colleagues were Muslims, but from the Sunni school. And in Muharram 2011, was a very special one because I was going to my daily majalis. And on the 5th night of Muharram, when I was getting ready after work to go majalis, one of my colleagues asked, "Why do you always go to mosque?" And I naturally replied, well, to pray and commemorate the tragedy of Karbala. So he got more inquisitive and started to ask more questions regarding the history of Karbala, the history behind our imams, some questions that I failed to answer actually. And whereas when I asked him questions regarding his school, he stood firm and would reply without hesitation. So my fate was at stake, and I felt quite embarrassed. So we decided to do some agreements, and so we would do both our research and then we would sit together and debate over it. That's when I started actually to question about my religion, question about our school, because I thought that I don't really know anything about my religion. So I started doing my research by listening to lectures and also reading books, gathering reference. And one major aspect in my research was the modesty within the life of the holy personalities of the holy household, and more importantly, the importance of hijab in the life of the great ladies of Islam. So I got attracted by this aspect of Islam, and also got intrigued by the confidence that the woman wearing hijab was showed. And I also felt that there's something that was missing in me. So as my research was going on, I felt that, okay, I think I need to think about it, more importantly. But I couldn't do that when I was in France because I grew up there. I stayed more than 20 years there, and it was difficult for me to change from not wearing hijab to wear hijab. And then one of the motivation for me to come to London also is to start a new life. And one niyat that I made is when I land to London, I will land with hijab. And alhamdulillah, that's what I managed to do. Hijab is a very sensitive topic in France. And since the hijab ban, it has been even more difficult for Muslim women to wear hijab openly. I personally didn't find any struggle because I was not wearing. However, I had some friends who were wearing hijab and found it difficult to find a decent work, for example, or even go to school. And the hijab ban also allowed the rulers of the country to forbid hijab openly in public areas such as school and workplaces. So it was pretty difficult for them to actually cope while wearing hijab. For example, if they were going to work, they needed to take the hijab off in front of the gate and they will put it back on when they go out from work. Well, before I believed that women had the freedom to showcase their beauty in the public, whereas there needs to be some decency in what you wear, of course. I thought that I wouldn't wear hijab because I grew up in a modern society where women were known by the beauty they possessed, and they wouldn't be able to do whatever they wanted with hijab. And I thought that hijab was acting as a barrier to my social life. My perception of hijab has changed since I moved to London. I found women working with hijab having a busy social life and also holding their own business as well. And I found also that women were more respected for your intelligence and personality instead of your beauty or physical attributes. I often go to France every 1 or 2 months to visit my family, and I keep the hijab on. The first time when I went back to France with hijab, that was pretty awkward because people knew me and they see me with hijab. That was very different for them, especially my friends who are not Muslim. But now they are used to it. I don't know about working, or if I move back to France forever, if I would wear it. I will try my best. But like I said, the social environment, the environment that you work in, it's very, very difficult, especially now. It's even more difficult. That's why I prefer staying in London for now.
I think they should keep doing the hijab. One day, the hijab itself, when they observe the hijab, the good hijab, the hijab itself will guide them into praying and fasting. Because these acts of worship, they guide each other. If you do one of them, it's going to lead you into the other. Just like the sins, when someone commits one sin, this one sin is going to take him to another, to the second, to the third. The same thing with acts of worship. When you observe one of them, that one, and you are persistent in that, that one day is going to lead you into another act of worship. And if you know that God wants you to do this, do it for Him. Don't do it to make your father happy, neither your mother, nor a friend in the community, nor for that person who wants to marry you tomorrow. Not because of them. Do it just for God. Because God wants you. God says, you are my servant, I created you, I want to see you in this shape, not in a different shape. And do it for Him. And once you do it for Him, you're going to love the hijab. You're going to advocate the hijab. You're going to promote the hijab in the community. You're going to advise your friends in the community that, listen, hijab is good. Believe me, it's good for us. It's good for our families. Even your children are going to feel proud of you. They will say, wow, mom lived in England, in France, in America, in the midst of non-Muslims. She went to college, university, and she was one in her class. The rest were without hijab, but she kept her hijab strong. But when it comes to real commitment, they say we are not ready. This is not good. This is not good. I think they are ready for it. As long as they have the will, they can find the way. When we have the will. It all depends on the will. It all depends when we know hijab is a command by God, not by man, not by certain men who wants to impose restrictions on women and they want to lock them down in their homes. It's not about that. Hijab will bring more value and more dignity and more honor to women. Hijab is not covering the brain of women. It's not going to cover her character and her brain and her intelligence. It is going to cover her beauty, and then she's going to use her beauty in the right place, not in the wrong place, with the right people, not with the wrong people.
While many disagree with its implementation and are threatened by its effect on Western culture, the hijab encompasses a spectrum of guidelines that aim to regulate the liaisons between men and women in terms of attire, conduct, and overall social etiquette. It supplements women both spiritually and psychologically, and can also bring benefit to the society at large. Despite its merits, the hijab remains to some as an obstacle in the battle between the traditions of the Muslim world and the West.